Hi, my name's Jerry, I'm a fantasy author, and in this short series of videos, I'm here to give you as much practical advice as I can about how to write better dialogue. As writers, we tend to consider dialogue to be a pretty straightforward matter. One person asks a question, the other one gives an answer. One person makes a statement, the other one gives their opinion or asks for details. That is, of course, assuming that everything works as intended, but sometimes communication just breaks down. Tensions run high, emotions take over, and differences become seemingly irreconcilable. In short, sometimes people fight. Now, as writers, we are also no strangers to the idea of conflict. After all, that is the foundation to the entirety of storytelling. However, the kind of conflict we usually talk about is the one between protagonist and antagonist, which is much more fundamental and also much grander in scale, both in terms of its stakes as well as its time span. Rarely, if ever, do we talk about how to write acute verbal conflict between people who might not even be on opposing sides. So in this video, that's what I want to hone in on, how you might approach writing a scene like that. So to get started, I usually like to use the method that I outlined in a previous video, which is where I take out my phone and I record myself essentially role-playing as the characters in the scene, just improvising the entire conversation line by line on a purely stream of consciousness basis. Once I have a couple of takes, I will transcribe the whole thing into a separate document, just the spoken words, so no descriptions, no action beats, and no dialogue tags even. And from there, I can start looking at it and seeing how I can edit it down so that it fits seamlessly into my narrative while preserving the emotional backbone of the scene. And the first question I ask is whether the characters are arguing, fighting, or falling out. Now, before I go into any detail, I just want to state for the record that I am not a behavioral psychologist, so nothing that I say here is meant to be scientific fact. I am just a guy who has lived for 41 years so far and who has experienced his own share of personal conflict. So with that in mind, let's look at each category in detail. And in a rare case, I will not actually be looking at books for examples, but rather the cinematic milestone of social commentary that is 2004's Mean Girls. In all seriousness, given the fact that the movie was based on a self-help book, it's no surprise that it contains a lot of succinct but very effective depictions of personal conflict. For example,
and they have this book, this burn book, where they write mean things about all the girls in our grade. Caddy, you gotta steal that book. No way! Oh, come on, we could publish it and then everybody would see what an axe wound she really is. I don't steal. That is for your feet. Caddy, there are two kinds of evil people. People who do evil stuff and people who see evil stuff being done and don't try to stop it.
Even if your characters get along perfectly well, you will still have moments where they simply disagree on something and have to debate. Both of them will present their arguments pro and con and invite the other person to share theirs, and even if one or both of them have very strong feelings on the matter, they will nonetheless listen to the other person's stance and at least strive to attain some sort of consensus. This is not conflict, this is just conversation working as intended. If everyone always agreed about everything, they wouldn't have much of a reason to talk to each other. The point where a debate turns into arguing is when one of the parties starts to feel that they're not being listened to. The result of this is that they start repeating and elaborating on the same thing over and over, getting increasingly frustrated as they try to get through to the other person. Meanwhile, the other person is getting frustrated because they just want to move on with the subject, but they keep having to repeat themselves even though they've already made themselves perfectly clear, and so the entire conversation is just going in circles. Janice says, "You should steal the book." Katie says no. Janice says, "It would be good if you stole the book." Katie says no. Janice says, "It would be morally right to steal the book." Rinse and repeat. So how can you express this in your dialogue? Well, in terms of the actual lines spoken, keep in mind that at this point, both characters are still under the impression that they're having a debate, so they will be trying to make more or less cohesive arguments. In terms of tone indicators, that's where you can start to hint that things are getting heated. For one, you can start using exclamation points and italics sparingly. And in your dialogue tags, you can start using stronger, more dramatic verbs, as well as include some quick action beats that express your character's mounting frustration. Arguing is just the beginning of conflict, and it has the best chances at peacefully de-escalating. This might be because one of the characters wises up and realizes how unconstructive it is, or because someone or something steps in to distract them, or because one of them actually concedes, maybe because they realize that they are in the wrong, but usually, and more dangerously, just because they're trying to keep the peace. More on that later. But sometimes, de-escalating is not an option, and that is when you get fighting.
Everybody done?
No. Mom, I didn't do it.
I don't know what to believe anymore.
Mom, believe me, I'm your daughter.
Why are my tribal vases under the sink?
Huh?
My tribal vases? Why were they under the sink?
I don't know.
This is the fertility vase of the Ndebele tribe. Does that mean anything to you?
No.
Who are you?
Where arguing was something of a transitional state away from civil discussion, fighting is open conflict, and its main characteristic is that the arguments give way to accusations. The way that this chiefly manifests in dialogue is that the characters stop using I sentences and start using you sentences. So it is no longer about what I think or what I feel, it is about what you said and you did. There is barely any pretense of argumentation anymore. Really, it's more of a race to see who can rack up more victim points before both of them get too fed up to continue.
Everybody done?
No. Mom, I didn't do it.
I don't know what to believe anymore.
Mom, believe me, I'm your daughter.
This is the fertility vase of the Ndebele tribe. Does that mean anything to you?
No.
Who are you?
Now, to be clear, my phrasing back there wasn't meant to trivialize the gravity of fighting. There are very real emotions involved, and they are very important to the people that hold them. If you've seen my previous series about writing descriptions, then you might remember me talking about the importance of writing with empathy and conviction. That is to say, putting yourself in your character's shoes and identifying with their feelings even if you disagree with them. And this is especially important in conflict scenes on both sides, because it's one thing when your POV character doesn't take the other person seriously, but it's a whole other thing when it's obvious that you as the author don't take the other person seriously, because that is when the other person starts to become a straw man. Now, this isn't necessarily bad, just make sure it's intentional. As far as style and composition goes, much of the same things apply as they did with arguing, only everything is more dramatic and amplified. But speaking of amplification, I do want to highlight that the difference between arguing and fighting is not one of volume. You can absolutely have loud arguments and quiet fights, and the latter can absolutely be just as intense as the former, if not more so. Now, fighting is unpleasant but not unsalvageable. Once everyone has had a chance to vent their feelings and the dust has settled, they can get started on finding that common ground again and fixing whatever needs to be fixed, provided, of course, that they're both still interested.
Oh God.
You dirty little liar.
I'm sorry, I can explain.
Explain how you forgot to invite us to your party?
Janice, I cannot stop this car. I have a curfew.
You know I couldn't invite you. I had to pretend to be plastic.
Buddy, you're not pretending anymore. You're plastic. Cold, shiny, hard plastic.
Curfew, 1 a.m. It is now 1:10.
Did you have an awesome time? Did you drink awesome shooters and listen to awesome music and then just sit around and soak up each other's awesomeness?
You know what? You're the one who made me like this, so you could use me for your 8th grade revenge.
God, see, at least me and Regina George know we're mean. You try to act like you're so innocent, like, oh, I used to live in Africa with all the little birdies and the little monkeys.
You know what? It's not my fault you're like in love with me or something.
What?
Oh no, she did not.
See, that is the thing with you plastics. You think that everybody is in love with you when actually everybody hates you.
That scene really deserves more credit for how accurately it depicts that sort of primal, almost animalistic state that our minds go into when we are just unloading on someone. Logic doesn't matter. Integrity doesn't matter. Truth doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is hurting the person in front of you, and to that end, you will say whatever it takes. Now, I have no intention of turning this into a 1-hour video essay, so I'm not gonna go into the psychology of the characters too much. Instead, I will just give a quick play-by-play of what's happening here. Katie starts out completely on the defensive. She knows she did wrong and she is overcome with guilt, and upon seeing this, Janice takes full advantage of it, basking in her status of righteous victimhood. Which, speaking from experience, is one of the most dangerously intoxicating feelings. To have that kind of moral high ground where you feel completely entitled to just twist that knife as much as you want, that is a power trip. It's terrible, but it's a rush. Now, at first, Katie tries to defend herself or deflect the accusations, but then Janice compares her to Regina, and that is when Katie breaks. Not so much because the comparison insults her, but because she knows that coming from Janice, this is a death sentence to their friendship, which is the only friendship Katie has known and actually cherished. She knows that she's ruined everything and it's all her own fault, and so she swings back with the desperation of someone who has nothing more to lose.
You know what? You're the one who made me like this, so you could use me for your 8th grade revenge. God, see, at least me and Regina George know we're mean. You try to act like you're so innocent.
See, this is what I meant when I said that logic and integrity do not matter. Janice Ian, who 10 seconds ago was comparing Katie to Regina and saying that's a bad thing, is now actively comparing herself to Regina and saying, oh, actually, Regina isn't even that bad. And Katie responds fully in kind by dragging out the lesbian rumor, not because she actually believes what she's saying, but because she knows this will hurt Janice, and that is the only thing that matters. The whole thing is just a bad time all around, and it's so well executed. Now that's all well and good, so how do you write your own falling out scene? Well, the first and most important thing is that a falling out can only happen between people who have history, because even though it is sparked by something that happened just now, it is never about the present. It is always about the past. This is the point where people dredge up every single injury, injustice, and wrongdoing they experienced during the relationship and present it as evidence of their continued suffering at the hands of the other person. Also, because logic and consistency don't matter, there can be wild jumps in the subject, especially if one person notices that the other's making a valid point, because relenting is almost never an option, and even when it is immediately turned into a weapon. Okay, fine, I'll admit that, because I'm a bigger person. Now, another stylistic technique I wanted to bring up is something that I mentioned in an earlier video, which is naturalistic dialogue. This is the practice of intentionally reflecting the imperfections of spontaneous human speech, which is where people hesitate or stumble over their words or break off sentences, etc. This can work in arguing and fighting because it helps to express the character's frustration, but I would actually advocate against it in falling out. The movie Dialog was definitely written with this in mind. Janice's lines are all completely cohesive and flawlessly articulated, even though in her headspace this would not really be realistic. But falling out scenes are all about the emotional catharsis, and for that you need effectiveness and clarity more than you need realism. So, what do you think? Was any of that useful? Was there something I missed? Was there something I should have talked more about? By all means, let me know in the comments, and until next time, stay tuned.